Amber Thurman tragically died after a failed abortion. But now Democrats, the media, and activists are trying to blame Georgia's pro-life law and Donald Trump for her death. While we are fact-checking this propaganda on today's episode of Relatable, we are also responding to a recent comment that the Pope made about the election. This episode is brought to you by our friends at Crowd Health. Go to joincrowdhealth.com/Allie. That's joincrowdhealth.com/Allie. Hey guys, welcome to Relatable. Happy Thursday. Hope everyone is having a wonderful week so far. We've got a ton to get to today, so I'm going to get right into it after I just point out this super cute sweatshirt that I'm wearing. This is my first time wearing my Jesus Wins merch, and I love it. It's just a reminder for us, not only during this election season, but forever, that Jesus wins in the end. And so we operate as people with hope, knowing that one day there will be no more corruption. There will be no more cowardice. There will be no more sin, no more sorrow, no more partisanship, no more disagreements. That Jesus is going to win. He is going to do away with evil forever and ever, and he will rule in perfect peace. So whenever we are looking at the chaos and the evil that goes on in this world, and we are tempted to feel like God is doing nothing, remember, he's never doing nothing. His eternal plan of redemption is always going off without a hitch. I was reading Psalm 49 this morning, and it talks about not worrying when you see an evil person flourishing, becoming wealthy, becoming successful, seeming like everything is falling into place for them, because that person is going to die just like everyone else. And in the end, all of the wealth and the fame that they've accumulated will come to nothing. We will all give an account to God. Psalm 37 has the same spirit, that do not be envious of wrongdoers or evildoers, for they will soon fade like the grass and wither like the green herb. And Jesus is coming back, and he is going to avenge his people. He is going to do away with wickedness forever and ever. And so we can trust that his wrath is kindling, that he has the day, the hour of his return already planned out, and he has since before time began. So our responsibility is to trust and obey, to do the next right thing in faith with excellence and for the glory of God, knowing that he wins in the end. And yet, Jesus winning is not an excuse for our apathy or our disengagement. As we've talked about several times, Jeremiah 29, most people know Jeremiah 29:11, for I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you. That's a beautiful verse when we're looking at it in context. But if you look at the entirety of that chapter, God is speaking to Israelites in captivity, in exile, in Babylon. And one of the commands that he gives them is to seek the welfare of the city that I have placed you in, for in its welfare you will find your welfare. Well, we're not ancient Israel, but we as Christians are exiles in this world, in this life. Our citizenship is in heaven. And if Israel was called to seek the welfare of the place that God had providentially placed them in the Old Testament, it would seem that the same principles would apply to us today, because we've been placed here in this temporal physical context, in the here and the now, in this tiny spot of eternity, on this tiny speck of the planet, by a God who does nothing arbitrarily or accidentally. He does everything with purpose. He does everything according to his perfect will, according to providence. And we were placed here to give him glory, to share the gospel, to do good for those around us. And one of the ways that we can do good for the neighbors that we are commanded to love is to care about politics. What do we always say? Politics matter because policy matters, because people matter. People are made in the image of God. They matter to God, therefore they matter to us. And we still live in a country in which we can exercise our right to vote. Who we vote for actually matters. The policies that they advocate for, that they push for, have a real effect on people's lives. The most tangible example I can think of this is, of course, abortion. We are looking at policy that can either spare the lives of these babies in the womb or make it as easy as possible for their innocent lives to be snuffed out. And you'll see a lot over the next few months, as we're about to talk about, when it comes to the discourse around abortion. You'll see a lot of arguments trying to persuade you via what I call toxic empathy into believing that the pro-choice, which is functionally a pro-abortion position, is the compassionate one. And here's the formula that you'll see. You've seen it several times, especially over the past few years, especially post-Dobbs decision, which overturned Roe v. Wade. The media will hoist up a particular victim. It will be a woman who says that she needed an abortion for whatever reason, because she was in a difficult financial situation. She was in an abusive relationship. She just had a child. She just doesn't want a baby right now, or maybe the baby got a life-limiting diagnosis. And they will bid you to feel what this woman feels. And they will then tell a story that is meant to prove to you that the pro-life laws that have been put in place in several Republican-led states since the Dobbs decision, that they are draconian, that they are cruel, that they are harming this woman who is just trying to exercise her quote-unquote bodily autonomy, is just trying to do what's best for her or do what's best for her children or her life or her future or her safety. And they will make you believe that these pro-life laws have just gone too far, that these pro-life laws are limiting miscarriage care, that they're causing women to die, that they're not pro-life laws at all, that they're just laws that are controlling women's bodies, damaging women's health care. And as they tell you these stories to get you to only put yourself in the shoes of the woman who is seeking an abortion, they are purposely ignoring the other person on the other side of this moral equation. And that, of course, is the baby in the womb. That, of course, is the person who is always the victim of every single abortion. And that is that image bearer, that helpless image bearer of God inside the womb. The reason why I call this toxic empathy is because they are not only bidding you to have compassion for the woman, they are bidding you to feel what she feels so that you affirm the sinful, damaging, deadly choice of abortion and to ignore the feelings, the needs, the rights, the well-being, the very existence of the baby who is dying, who is being murdered in an abortion procedure. See, Christians are not called to empathy, actually. Empathy can be good or bad. You put yourself in someone's shoes, you feel how they feel. That might motivate you to do good. That might motivate you to share with them, to be generous with them, to love them, to help them, to meet their needs. Or you might feel what they feel so much that you are completely blinded to reality and blinded to morality. Empathy can only get you so far. It can lead you to actually cruelty and supporting something like abortion, or maybe it could lead you to love and understanding. But love and understanding and compassion and service and generosity, those are the virtues that we're reaching toward as Christians, not empathy as an end. Christians are called to a better approach, the truth in love approach, because love and empathy are not the same things. Empathy feels, love is not a feeling. It does. It sacrifices. And God is love. 1 John 4:8, he defines it in 1 Corinthians 13. And one of the ways that he defines it is that love never rejoices in wrongdoing, but rejoices with the truth. See, empathy is not concerned with the truth. Empathy is concerned with how someone feels, which again can be okay. But we cannot truly love someone without first starting with the truth. That's what the God who is love tells us. So in every issue, especially when it comes to this life and death issue of abortion, we have to start there with what is true. Not just how does this woman feel, but what is true. What is scientifically true about life inside the womb? What is medically true about what an abortion is? What is morally true about what is right and wrong when it comes to the taking of innocent life? And most importantly, what is biblically true? What does God have to say about life inside the womb? What does God have to say about the intentional killing of an innocent person? That is the lens through which, the truth in love lens through which we must look at every issue, especially political issues, especially this issue of abortion. So that is our launching pad into this conversation about this tragic story that you've seen circulating on social media, that the media, Kamala Harris, is using as a justification for voting for her, about this single mother, Amber Thurman, who tragically died after taking abortion pills to kill her unborn twin babies. So we'll get into all of that in just a second. Just a couple things that I want to tell you before we get into the story and the details of it. Number one, I have a book coming out called Toxic Empathy, and it's coming out October 15th. And it is a guidebook for you all to have these very difficult conversations, especially in this election season. Of course, it's relevant beyond that. It's particularly for Christian women. We go through abortion, gender, sexuality in marriage, immigration, and then what's often referred to as social justice. And we look at how progressives couch these issues, how they make these issues look, how they use toxic empathy to convince Christian women that the progressive side of these issues is the compassionate one, is the righteous one. And then we look at the other side. Well, who is actually being harmed by the progressive position on these things? And then we back up and ask the most important question, but what is true? What is good? What is right? And so this is going to equip you with all of the arguments, with all of the information that you need to be able to defend your position on all of these very contentious issues completely, confidently. So this is an easy book to read. It's a short book to read, but it is jam-packed with the best logical and biblical arguments that I know, that I've read, that I could come up with. And this is so important for you to get before the election. Go ahead and pre-order it so you get it as soon as it comes out on October 15th. You can just go to toxicempathy.com, toxicempathy.com, and then you can pre-order it there. Also, if you want to join the launch team for Toxic Empathy, go to toxicempathy.com/team. I would love for you to help promote this book and to get as many people reading it as possible. So go to toxicempathy.com/team to apply for that. All right. Before we get into this, let me go ahead and tell you about our first sponsor for the day, and that is Every Life, which is a very fitting sponsor because this is a pro-life diaper company. While other trusted household diaper brands vocally or financially support abortion, Every Life believes that no matter how a baby is conceived or planned or unplanned, or regardless of a person's socioeconomic background, that baby matters. They demonstrate this with how they run their company. They support all parents, adoptive parents or biological parents, making sure that they have everything they need. But they also provide resources to pregnant moms in need through their support of pro-life organizations and pregnancy centers. Plus, the diapers that they sell are truly amazing. We use Every Life diapers in our home. I never have to worry about leaks. They really work, and they're really high quality ingredients. If you go to everylife.com and use code Allie10, you'll get a 10% discount on your order. Everylife.com, code Allie10. All right, so you've probably seen the posts on X or on Instagram about Amanda Thurman. This was originally published by ProPublica, and here is a summary. In 2022, so that's also very important to note right there. In 2022, why is this just coming out now? Surely it's not only coming out now as a prop for the election, right? That would be a really sad way to use the death of these babies and this mother. But a single mother in Georgia was 9 weeks pregnant with twins when she decided to take abortion pills that would end the lives of her two babies. She then became critically ill hours after taking the second pill and was rushed to the hospital. The doctors failed to treat her appropriately, and she later died of sepsis. Now, the pro-abortion side is blaming Georgia's abortion ban for the doctors' unwillingness to act and ultimately for her death. So this woman, Amber Thurman, scheduled a DNC abortion in North Carolina, where that form of abortion was still legal at that stage. And about 9 weeks along, that can be a pretty typical form of abortion. It stands for dilation and curettage. And I do think it's important to just explain what's happening there, what happens in that process. This is not hyperbole. You can even go to the Planned Parenthood website, and if you can kind of wade through the euphemisms that they use, like contents of pregnancy or contents of conception or products of conception, terminating pregnancy, you will see that they actually do explain what happens in these kinds of abortions. And if you've seen Unplanned, you know exactly how this happens, and it's really sad. So just brace yourself. But there's actually like a vacuum tube that is placed in the cervix of the mother into the uterus to suck these living babies out of the womb. Now, the hope is at that point that those babies are already dead, because there's a variety of ways that they try to starve and poison the babies before the D&C, but that is not always the case, as Abby Johnson can tell you, who is a former Planned Parenthood employee. And so literally with a vacuum, these babies are sucked out. And Abby Johnson has talked about how calloused these doctors were during these abortions, that one of the doctors in the D&C that she witnessed joked as he was sucking out this living baby out of the womb, who was kicking and moving its arms, said, "Beam me up, Scotty," and literally sucked the baby out of the womb. So this is it's a disgusting, barbaric practice. And so that's what this woman was seeking for her twin children, but she got stuck in traffic. She missed her appointment. And so the clinic in North Carolina offered her these two abortion pills that you take one after the other. One actually kills the baby, starves the baby, and then the other makes your uterus contract. And so the babies, in this case, plural, are expelled from your uterus. And so from my understanding, without even seeing her, without even doing another ultrasound confirming how far along she was, this Planned Parenthood just said, yeah, here, take these abortion pills. So she drove home, she took these abortion pills, and this is approved, by the way, by the FDA. And at first there was only cramping, which is normal for this 2-pill regimen. But days after she took the second pill, the pain increased and blood was pouring out of her. She knew something was wrong. And so she went to the doctor where they found, or the emergency room where they found, that her white blood cell count was really high. Her blood pressure was really low. They could tell that there were still baby remnants in her uterus and that she had an infection. And unfortunately, this happens far too often in these situations. And you'll remember, it is the abortion lobby that has fought tooth and nail against every single Republican legislative attempt to ensure that women are under a doctor's care when they are going through an abortion. So the abortion lobby can pretend like they are the ones that care about women. They want to make it as easy as possible for women to have an abortion. Mail order abortion pills, that's something that they fought for. They want it to be possible for women to be able to get an abortion via a midwife or a nurse. Doesn't even have to be an MD. They want it as easy as possible, which of course is not good for women either. ProPublica says that instead of performing the ER doctors, the newly criminalized procedure, they're talking about a DNC, they continued to gather information and dispense medicine, the summary shows. And so what ProPublica is trying to say there is that the DNC was actually outlawed by this Georgia pro-life law. They're very careful not to lay any blame on the doctors, because if they laid any blame on the doctors or the hospital, then they would lose their argument. Their argument is that this is the fault of Republicans, this is the fault of Donald Trump, this is the fault of pro-life laws, and their argument is that the hospital was restricted from giving this woman a DNC and taking the baby remnants out of her to save her life. But of course, that's not true. That's not what the Georgia law says, and we'll get into that a little bit more in a second. But more about her story. They waited and waited to give her antibiotics, and they finally gave her the antibiotics. And then they decided, okay, we're going to do the DNC, and she died on the operating table. And she leaves behind a 6-year-old son. It's the whole thing is tragic. 3 lives unnecessarily lost. ProPublica says the Maternal Mortality Review Committee concluded that there was a good chance providing a DNC earlier could have prevented Thurman's death. Of course, that's the standard of care. It is not clear from the records available why doctors waited to provide a DNC to Thurman. All right, then that kind of undermines your entire case here, right? It's not like the doctors were like, well, this is illegal. We don't know why. It could have been all kinds of justifications they gave themselves for negligence. But ProPublica, or Publica, I'm not sure which one it is, writes that the lack of medical action was due to the hospital not having a policy guide on how to interpret the state abortion ban, which again, that's the hospital's fault. That's the hospital's fault, which they claim is difficult to interpret due to vague and conflicting language. Well, we'll verify that in just a second. The article also says Republican officials across the country have largely rejected calls to provide guidance, which of course isn't true. So let's look at what the act actually says that they're referring to, that they are blaming for Amanda Thurman's death. But first, I want to pause and tell you about a couple things. I want to remind you that Share the Arrows is happening in a little over a week. And as we're talking about, there's a lot of death and destruction and sadness and just a reason for dismay. And I feel, I don't know if you guys feel, apparently you do, because thousands of you are going to be there, but I'm sure the rest of you do too. I just feel this craving to be around like-minded people, to link arms with you, to look around and say, okay, we're on the same page, right? You're with me, you got my back, I got your back. I need encouragement. I need to be built up right now with like-minded women. And that's exactly why I am hosting this Share the Arrows conference, and it's next Saturday. It's in Plano, Texas. We do still have seats left. I mean, y'all have completely defied our expectations for the size of this event. We keep on having to open different segments of the sanctuary, but we're so happy to do it. Obviously, women are craving truth. A lot of women's conferences, not all, a lot of women's conferences are just focused on feelings. They're just focused on making women feel better about themselves. And we're told in some kind of Christianese that you're beautiful and perfect the way you are. And the biggest problem that you have is your low self-esteem. This is not that conference. This is a conference for women who want truth. This is a conference for women who want clarity. This is a conference for women who want to be filled with courage, who want to be challenged by God's word. That's why I have the speakers that I do. I mean, it's got to be the best lineup ever. Rosaria Butterfield, Elisa Childers, Candace Cameron Bure, Abby Halberstadt, worship by Francesca Battistelli. I cannot wait to stand with thousands of you at this church and sing This Is My Father's World together, y'all. It's going to be so good, so good for the heart, so good for the soul. And so if you haven't gotten your tickets yet, go to sharethearrows.com. Every seat in the house is a great seat. And so if you'll be sitting in the balcony, if you're buying tickets now, I probably will sit in the balcony for a lot of this because I think those are some of the best seats. But also, if you want floor seating, preferred seating, you can get your VIP ticket, your all access ticket. Of course, you can come backstage if you're all access, and you can get a breakfast with Allie ticket. All of those are still available too, but we do have a limited capacity in the sanctuary. Like at some point they're going to be like, no, Allie, we cannot keep doing this. There's no more. And so we don't have that much space left. I want you to get your ticket. If you haven't already, go to sharethearrows.com. You can get your ticket. I am so excited for this. And please, if you're coming or if you're not coming, please just pray for this event. Like our related bros out there who are not coming to this event, maybe we'll have something for you in the future, but this is just for women. All of you who are attending or not, please pray for this event. I had a friend who reminded me that there are going to be spiritual attacks leading up to this event and during this event. And I'm someone who I can get so caught up in just like the physical and the logistical and planning and all of that, that I forget that, oh yeah, Satan hates this conference. Like Satan hates women hearing truth. He wants women to take the bite of the forbidden fruit. He doesn't want women to hear the gospel and to be equipped. He wants women to keep questioning, did God really say? And so we need your prayers. We need God's favor, his protection, and just pray that God would be glorified. Pray for all the logistical stuff too, but pray that God would be glorified through all of this. And thank you so much to those who have been praying. I really appreciate it. So anyway, if you haven't gotten your tickets yet or your friends haven't gotten your tickets yet, go to sharethearrows.com. You can also see all the FAQs on there if you've got any questions. All right. Before we debunk everything that we just heard about this tragic story of Amber Thurman, let me pause and tell you about our next sponsor for the day, and that is Magic Spoon. So I don't know if you caught the episode with Dr. McCary yesterday, just talking about what we 90s kids grew up eating for breakfast. Oh my goodness, so much sugar. And I'm so glad that we're all coming to a place where we realize, okay, maybe whole foods are really the medicine that we are seeking for our bodies, and we're trying to make healthier choices. But if you still love the taste, the nostalgia of awesome cereal, and you want that healthier choice, you need to check out Magic Spoon. Magic Spoon is a delicious cereal that tastes like your childhood favorites, but without the sugar and with a ton of protein. Every serving of Magic Spoon cereal has 13 grams of protein, 0 grams of sugar, and 4 grams of net carbs. The most popular flavors are fruity and cocoa. I love the cocoa. Mix that with some peanut butter. So good. Get $5 off your next order at magicspoon.com/relatable, or look for Magic Spoon in your nearest grocery store. That's magicspoon.com/relatable for $5 off. Magic Spoon, hold on to the dream. So let's look at this law, Georgia's Life Act. The Georgia legislature passed a fetal heartbeat law known as the Life Act. Governor Brian Kemp signed it into law. The Life Act prohibits most abortions once a physician can detect the heartbeat. The law does provide exceptions for abortion in cases of medical emergencies, medically futile pregnancies. So like an ectopic pregnancy, that's where the baby would be growing, for example, in the fallopian tube. That can be deadly for the mother, and there's no fixing that. The baby does have to be removed. And also it does provide exceptions for pregnancies that result from rape or incest. And so I'm not saying that you should agree with all of those exceptions. That's just what the law says. And also, as many OBGYNs have testified even before Congress, when a woman's life is in danger, no matter what point of pregnancy it is, the option to save both, or to save as many people as possible, is to deliver the child. If the child has to come out anyway, there is no reason for the child to have to die first. We hear a lot justifications for late-term abortion, so like third trimester or post-viability, like after 24-week abortions. We hear Kamala Harris even said this on the debate stage. No one is doing that because, they want to. All of a sudden they decided to. Well, it does happen actually thousands and thousands of times in the United States every year. But also, if a woman's life is at risk after that, there's no reason to kill the child before you deliver the child. You don't have to be a doctor to figure that out. That's just logical. Either way, you're giving birth. Are you going to give birth to a dead baby or a living baby? If a woman's health demands that she no longer be pregnant, and there are cases like that, you deliver the baby first. And yes, in some cases, the baby will tragically die, especially when it's pre-viability, when we're talking about those really preemie babies, like 18 weeks, say for whatever reason, the mother has, I don't know, say it's her water breaks that early. And there's no way for this baby to survive. This mother is going to die if the baby is not removed. You deliver that baby. You give them the most dignity possible. You don't dismember the baby first. That's never right. And so that I just don't agree with that. You make every effort to save both lives. Yes, the mother's life absolutely matters, but you make every effort to save both. And in a case like ectopic pregnancy, where the baby cannot be saved and the mother has to be saved, yes, of course, you save the mother and you remove the baby from the fallopian tube. So let's look at what this Life Act actually says and how it defines abortion. Does it actually prevent a D&C if a woman has a miscarriage or if she had an induced abortion where the dead baby is still inside her? Here's what the law means and what the law actually prohibits. Abortion, it defines it this way, means the act of using, prescribing, or administering any instrument, substance, device, or other means with the purpose to terminate a pregnancy with knowledge that termination will, with reasonable likelihood, cause the death of an unborn child, provided, however, that any such act shall not be considered an abortion if the act is performed with the purpose of A, removing a dead unborn child caused by spontaneous abortion, or removing an ectopic pregnancy. So it is abortion that is prohibited, not miscarriage care. Now, here's what some people could say if I am to give the benefit of the doubt to the other side, which I am hesitant to do because I don't think most people even talking about this have read the law at all. But one could argue that here is the point of confusion. Removing a dead unborn child caused by a spontaneous abortion. So that means miscarriage. I don't even like that language, but by spontaneous abortion or miscarriage. So I guess the hospital or doctors could have said, well, if we remove a child that is dead from an induced abortion, is that still legal? But here's why I actually do not think that it is confusing, because if you go down a little bit further in the bill, we see that it defines what a medical emergency is and in what cases an abortion, so even like an induced abortion is allowed. If you go to Section 3, number 3, of this bill, we see here medical emergency. So this is the exception to the no abortion rule in the Georgia law. Medical emergency means a condition in which an abortion is necessary in order to prevent the death of the pregnant woman or the substantial and irreversible physical impairment of a major bodily function of the pregnant woman. No such greater risk shall be deemed to exist if it is based on a diagnosis or claim of a mental or emotional condition of the pregnant woman, or that the pregnant woman will purposefully engage in conduct which she intends to result in her death or in substantial and irreversible physical impairment of a major bodily function. So a woman can't come in and say, hey, I'm going to harm myself or harm my unborn child unless you give me an abortion. That's not a reason for abortion. Her saying, oh, like I have mental health problems, that's not a reason for abortion. Reason for abortion in the state of Georgia is to save the mother's physical life or to prevent serious physical harm from her. That means that even if the child had been alive in Amber Thurman's womb, she could have legally gotten an abortion at this point in the state of Georgia. So definitely she could have legally gotten DNC after her baby had died inside her in the state of Georgia. That is completely legal. And it is the hospital's fault if they have not provided guidance to their doctors. It is these doctors and nurses' fault if they did not do what needed to be done. Sadly, but also thankfully, I have talked to many of you who have gone through miscarriages in these states where the pro-life laws have been passed, and you have all been able to get the miscarriage care that you needed without a problem. There are pro-life doctors also speaking out about this. This is according to the American Association of Pro-Life Obstetricians and Gynecologists. They say this after they explain the timeline of what happened to Amber Thurman. They say, and this is absolutely true, these drugs, the abortion drugs, were the root cause of the following events. And then they describe exactly what happened with her bleeding, her having to go to the ER. The doctor said that this was her diagnosis, should have been her diagnosis, that they say any first-year resident could have made. Endometritis due to incomplete abortion with probable sepsis, standard of care for treatment, immediate antibiotics, and DNC. They said that waiting 3 hours until she started on antibiotics after she presented with these symptoms violates standard of care. They said DNC should have been immediate and concurrent with the initiation of antibiotics and was not prevented by Georgia's law. They also explained the standard of care after Amber continues to show that her infection is not going away with antibiotics. Immediate DNC. Obviously, what they were doing was not working, and she's at imminent risk of death. To continue on the same course was negligence, pure and simple. And again, they just go through at every point where she continues to get worse and worse. They should have done an immediate DNC. There was no reason for them to wait approximately 20 hours when she is on the brink of death. They also say this is one of the most clear-cut cases of medical malpractice based on the information available publicly that we have ever seen. Standard of care on her arrival was an immediate DNC and initiation of antibiotics. Had this been done, she most likely would be alive today. They say her death was due to two things: abortion drugs and lack of appropriate and timely medical care, which is perfectly legal in pro-life states. And that's true. There is no pro-life law that restricts or prohibits in any way miscarriage care. Wherever that is happening, that is the fault of the hospitals. That is the fault of the doctors. Doctors have always had to navigate abortion law. There have always been abortion laws on the books. They've always had to navigate those at different points of pregnancy. It is a lie that all of a sudden doctors don't know how to do this. And I don't want to think that this negligence is purposeful to make a political point. I really pray that that is not the case. I don't think that's the heart of most doctors and nurses. But hospitals have got to get it together. It is not the fault of laws protecting babies from being dismembered. It is medical malpractice and in some cases, probably political malintent. These pro-life OBGYNs say this complication of abortion drugs is not rare. Retained tissue requiring surgical evacuation occurs in roughly 5% of women who take these drugs at 9 weeks. 5% is huge, by the way. That sounds small. That is not small when it comes to medicine. You know that there are some doctors, I've talked about having a VBAC before. That's a vaginal birth after C-sections. I had 2 C-sections, and then I had a vaginal birth. There are many doctors who will not do that because of the risk of uterine rupture. The risk of uterine rupture, if you have TOLAC, which is trial of labor after cesarean, is less than 1%. It's like 0.2%. Okay? And for that, many doctors will not even try because, of course, it is catastrophic. I'm not saying that the risk isn't there. It's catastrophic if a uterine rupture does happen, but it's extremely rare. And still, many doctors will not even allow you to try. And yet, we hear that abortion is safe. You'll even see propaganda hearing that abortion is safer than labor and delivery. Well, if you take a medication abortion, so that is the abortion procedure for the earliest points of pregnancy, roughly 5% of women who take these drugs that early on, the first trimester, 9 weeks, have retained tissue that requires a DNC. Retained tissue means baby parts. still inside them. By the way, at 9 weeks, like they're sprouting arms and legs. Okay, I've seen my babies on the ultrasound at 9 weeks. It's not just a glob of tissue. You're looking at a tiny human being. And that's abortion. And if there had been an abortion ban, all 3 of them would still be alive. All right. Next sponsor for the day before we get into the rest of this is America's Christian Credit Union. It's sad that we live in a time where we have to worry about debanking. We have to worry about your financial institution potentially cutting you off because they don't like the things that you're buying. They don't like the things that you're saying. We've seen with some financial providers, they will inform their customers that they can no longer work with them because of their public persona. How frightening is that? That is not something I want to worry about. And I'm sure it's not something you want to worry about either. So switch to a financial institution that aligns with your values. Switch to America's Christian Credit Union. They were started by pastors to provide financial services to their congregants, and now they have expanded with over 5,000 shared branches and 30,000 ATMs nationwide. For a limited time, earn $400 when you open a new checking account with qualifying activities. Plus, my listeners get an additional $100 bonus with promo code Allie. Go to americaschristiancu.com/Allie. America's Christian Credit Union is federally insured by the NCUA. Here's what Kamala Harris had to say. A young mother from Georgia should be alive today, raising her son and pursuing her dream of attending nursing school. This is exactly what we feared when Roe v. Wade was struck down in more than 20 states. Trump abortion bans prevent doctors from providing basic medical care. That is malicious disinformation. Not even misinformation. That is malicious disinformation. That is not true. Whenever you see these stories, guys, these stories of toxic empathy, which persuades you to only care about the woman, we should care about the woman. But to ignore the child that is actually being victimized, remember that no pro-life law restricts or prohibits miscarriage care in any way. And actually, a lot of these pro-life laws, to many of our dismay, have a lot of exceptions. And so it doesn't even follow that the pro-life law is the cause of women not getting miscarriage care. This miscarriage care or lack of miscarriage care lie that you are hearing over and over again is how they are getting pro-life Christians to vote Democrat, because they are convincing you that, look, voting for this rabidly pro-abortion politician, which is Kamala Harris, is not pro-abortion. What did she say at the debate? You're not compromising your faith. You don't have to compromise your sincerely held beliefs to vote for me. Gosh, like, how satanic is that? Satan does disguise himself rather as an angel of light. Really reminds me of that, using just like biblical sounding words to tell such an ugly, murderous lie. But the truth is, voting for the ability, the access to, the right to an abortion makes easier the slaughter of unborn children. You are saying, when you vote for someone like Kamala Harris, you are saying that you do not believe that those image bearers inside the womb have the same right to life that you do. And I would like for you to logically explain why. Why? Is it because they're smaller? Is it because they're younger? Is it because they're less sentient? Is it because they have less of an intellectual capacity? Is it because they're weaker than you? What is it? Is it because of their location inside the womb? Are those good justifications for killing someone? Is it because they're unwanted? Is it because they might have a hard life? Again, are those justifications for killing people outside the womb? If you wouldn't apply those justifications to killing people outside of the womb, why do you apply them for people inside the womb? And if you believe in abortion through 6 weeks, 9 weeks, 12 weeks, why? Why not 24? Why not 36? What's the difference? We're all perfectly human from the point of conception onward. We've got our own DNA from that point. So what's the scientific difference? And therefore, what's the moral difference between a baby at conception and a baby at 40 weeks? Yes, it understandably horrifies us more that babies that late in the game, in pregnancy, are dismembered, that their spinal cords are sliced, and then they are delivered dead and limp. Of course, that kind of barbarism and violence is going to disturb us more. But the truth is, the babies at 9 weeks are just as much babies. They're just as much human beings. Even if you use embryo, even if you say zygote, even if you say fetus, these are all just stages in human development, just like infant or toddler or teenager. It doesn't mean that they are less human. So if you believe in the right to abortion, explain why you don't believe that these human beings should have the same legal right to live, the same legal protections against murder as you and I do. Explain your position not only logically and scientifically, but please biblically. Because when I read my Bible, I read the command against murder. I read about the God who created us fearfully and wonderfully in our mother's womb. And the truth is that Kamala Harris and Donald Trump are too pro-choice for my liking. I mean, Donald Trump has talked about, maybe a 16-week compromise. And, I'm going to be great for women's reproductive health. And he kind of flip-flopped on Amendment 4 in Florida, which would allow abortion through all 9 months in the state of Florida. But when I look at the two, because at the end of the day, this election is between two people. That's it. It's a binary choice. And when I look at Donald Trump and I look at Kamala Harris, I see a huge difference in how they will treat pro-life policy and pro-lifers. When I look at Kamala Harris and I see that as Attorney General of California, she went after pro-life reporter David Daleiden, who reported on the alleged pay-for-play scheme by Planned Parenthood to take and then sell baby body parts from abortions. When I see that she tried to force pro-life pregnancy centers through the FACT Act to advertise for abortion that was overturned by the Supreme Court because it was a violation of the First Amendment. When I see that the Harris-Biden DOJ has jailed praying pro-lifers, pro-life grandmothers who were blocking the entrance to a murder mill, Planned Parenthood, like they are in prison right now because of the obscure FACE Act, peaceful pro-lifers who were trying to prevent murder. They are the ones who are going to prison, but not the abortionists. Talk about calling evil good and good evil. That is the Harris-Biden administration. She will do the bidding of Planned Parenthood. Your First Amendment rights be damned. That's who Kamala Harris is. She voted against the Born Alive Infant Survivors Protection Act in 2019 that did not restrict abortion at all, but simply said, authored by Ben Sasse, that if a baby survives an abortion, they have to be given health care. She voted no. She voted no on that. And of course, Tim Walz has the same stance. That's why at least 8 babies, at least that we know of, have died after botched abortions in the state of Minnesota. He said that he was more pro-choice than Nancy Pelosi. So that means all in through all 9 months for any reason paid for by the taxpayer. And then I look at Donald Trump. And I wish he wouldn't say the things that he did about abortion. I wish he'd be stronger on it. I wish he were personally more pro-life. But I know for a fact, because of some things I can't say publicly because they're conversations that were not my own conversations, but conversations with people who know Donald Trump, who I trust very much, that Donald Trump can and has been moved on this subject. And we saw that with Amendment 4 with Florida. He said, I don't know about the whole 6 weeks thing. That law is too strict. Maybe Amendment 4 is fine. I'm paraphrasing there, but it seemed like he was voting in favor of it. But then there were a lot of pro-lifers around Donald Trump. That's a big difference between Trump and Kamala, who said no. Like, let me tell you exactly what this amendment does. And he said, no, I'm voting no on Amendment 4. His mind can be changed. You think Kamala Harris's mind can be changed by a pro-lifer? She might turn around and throw you in jail. I mean, Donald Trump did give us the Dobbs decision through his appointment of Supreme Court justices. I do believe, even though he has said things that I do not like, when it comes to pro-life legislation, that he will sign that and that he is on the side of life, especially when it comes to the rest of his policies, economics, immigration, crime, foreign policy. I think we're looking at less war and a lot less violence and a lot more peace and order with Donald Trump. So I think life in and outside of the womb benefits from a Donald Trump presidency. I only see how life in and outside of the womb is harmed by a bloodthirsty Kamala Harris presidency. Yes, it's an election between the lesser of two evils, but guess what? Every election is a choice between the lesser of two evils because we are not voting for a savior. We've already got that. The best alternative to Kamala Harris is the guy that's on the ticket. That's Donald Trump. That's how I'm thinking about how I'm voting in this election based on this issue that is so important to me. So beware of the toxic empathy that is going to try to get you to downplay Kamala Harris's record and to vote for her out of a false sense of compassion. All right, a couple more things to say. Let me tell you about our last sponsor for the day, and that is My Patriot Supply. There's a lot going on. We don't know how this election is going to turn out. Yes, we know that Jesus wins, but we just want to be prepared for any kind of emergency, anything that might happen. You want an emergency food supply kit from My Patriot Supply. Go to preparewithallie.com and save $50 on a 4-week emergency food kit. And My Patriot Supply will send it really fast, and it'll come in an unmarked box. And so for all of your privacy and security, but these are really good meals. It's so much better to be safe than sorry when it comes to your food supply. Go to preparewithallie.com for that discount, preparewithallie.com. Okay, the Pope had something to say about the argument that I just made, kind of. The Pope, I'm not Catholic, but I have a lot of Catholic friends, and there are a lot of Catholics on the conservative side. And so I'm always interested in what the Pope says. From my understanding, most of you conservative Catholics out there really do not like the Pope and don't like the things that he says, which I, as a Protestant, see as, I don't see it as positive that he is progressive in so many ways, but I see it as a positive that there are so many strong Catholics saying, yeah, what the Pope is saying is just wrong and unbiblical, because the unconditional fealty to any one person gets us into a lot of messes, especially theological messes. And so it's good. Keep questioning, keep going back to the truth in Scripture. And I know that there have been a lot of popes also, especially in recent years, maybe not a lot of popes, but popes in recent years that have written a lot of good stuff that we Protestants have even benefited from, like the theology of the body. But this Pope is not quite as poignant. He is not quite as profound. He says things that I think are just downright dumb. And here's one of them, Sot 1.
Ambedue sono contro la vita, sia quello che butta via i migranti, sia quello che uccide i bambini. Nella morale politica, in genere, si dice che non votare è brutto, non è buono, si deve votare e si deve scegliere il male minore. Chi è il male minore? Quella signora o quel signore? Non so, ognuno in coscienza pensi e faccia.
Okay, so if you're just listening to this, let me kind of just paraphrase what he said. You can see the captions on the screen if you're watching on YouTube. But he basically said, look, you're voting between the lesser of two evils. You got to vote. Okay, I agree with that. I agree with both of those things. But he basically makes the argument that both sides are morally equivalent. On one side, he says you've got people throwing out migrants, which I guess is the Republican side. On the other side, you've got the pro-abortion side. Look, enforcing your borders is not the same thing as killing an unborn child. Borders are good. Walls are good. Security is good. National sovereignty is good. Protection is good. Everywhere we see walls mentioned in the Bible, they are at least symbols, if not literal demonstrations of security and stability and protection for a city. Even if we look at how Israel was to treat sojourners and foreigners in the Old Testament, yes, they were to be compassionate towards them, but those foreigners were not permitted to illegally come into Israel and to act as a pagan. They had to assimilate. They had to assimilate to the laws, to the regulations. And of course, that was a theocracy. And so even the religious practices of Israel. And so not that we are applying all Old Testament law to America today, because we are not ancient Israel. We don't live in a theocracy. But if we want to apply the principles of Scripture, which I think is a good idea since God made everything and therefore he is in charge of everything, to today, to understanding how do we think about national sovereignty, how do we think about borders, how do we think about laws, I think we can say, sure, we can have compassion for the asylum seeker. We can have compassion for the person who we can have compassion for anyone, whether that person is illegal or legal, but that does not mean we have to be okay with the mass importation of unassimilated immigrants. We don't have to be okay with that. China doesn't have to be okay with that. Zimbabwe doesn't have to be okay with that. India doesn't have to be okay with that. Australia doesn't have to be okay with that. God gave us nations and borders for our good. God also gave us governments for our good. Romans 13. The government is meant to be an institution, an instrument by God to punish the evildoer and to reward good. Laws, order are all God's common grace to people. And it is chaos, it is disorder, it is lawlessness, it is borderlessness that hurts people so much, that exacerbates and incentivizes things like drug and gun and human trafficking. Strong borders, strong American borders are good for us. They're also good for the world because immigrants are disincentivized from making that dangerous trek into our border, sometimes at the expense of their lives and also at the expense of the citizens in the countries that they left. And so, no, it's not the same at all. Immigration policy is good. Deportation of illegal aliens is good. It's an enforcement of the law, and that is the punishment for committing the crime of illegally entering our country. And so, no, the Pope does not have discernment there. Not at all. Some things he says, like people care too much about their pets and not enough about kids, he is spot on. When it comes to things like this, and when it comes to other theological aspects, the other day he said that all roads lead to God. False. False. That's simply not true. Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. If everyone came to God through whatever means, why did Jesus die on the cross? Why did he sacrifice himself for our sins? He sacrificed himself so we could be reconciled to a holy God by grace through faith in him. So that's gospel, okay? That's the gospel. If you get that wrong, if anyone gets that wrong, including the Pope, that person is not a Christian. Like, that is the fundamental belief of Christianity. So I hope and pray that we misunderstood, that he misspoke, and ultimately that the Pope understands the saving grace of the gospel. I think the rest of his errors, political errors, would be righted if he would right the fundamental theological wrong that he has about salvation. All right, that's all we got time for today. Be back here on Monday.